For more than a decade, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt were not simply actors. They were a vision of perfection. Two stars whose lives seemed to merge into one glittering narrative of romance, family, and global influence. Yet today, when their names appear together, it is often in the context of legal disputes, custody battles, and painful memories. What happened? How did a love story once hailed as Hollywood's golden dream unravel into one of the industry's most public heartbreaks? The answer, as both Jolie and Pitt themselves have hinted in different ways, is not simple. It is tangled in fame, pressure, family, and above all, Brad Pitt's battle with alcohol, a struggle that did not just affect him, but everyone closest to him. And if we look closely, this is not just their story. It is the story of how addiction quietly enters a household, reshapes relationships, and leaves children to grow up with wounds that the outside world often cannot see. From Hollywood's golden couple to the harsh reality of a broken home, how Brad Pitt's battle with alcohol addiction unraveled his marriage to Angelina Jolie, cast a shadow over their children's lives, and at the same time highlighted the resilience, courage, and unyielding strength of a woman who chose to protect her family, to lead with compassion, and to keep moving forward despite the wounds of the past. There was a time when the names Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt did not simply represent two movie stars. They embodied the very idea of Hollywood perfection. Together, they were celebrated as the golden couple, gracing red carpets hand in hand, raising 6 children in a family that seemed larger than life, and appearing side by side not only on screen but also on humanitarian missions across the world. To millions, they were not just actors, but symbols of love, power, and glamour woven into a single narrative. Yet beneath the glittering surface lay a much darker reality, one that slowly unraveled the fairy tale: Brad Pitt's prolonged struggle with alcohol. Alcohol was not just a private weakness. It was the silent intruder that crept into the marriage, corroding trust, magnifying conflict, and creating a household atmosphere of instability. Pitt himself would later admit that drinking had consumed his life, and with it, the foundation of his family. What the public once admired as a perfect union eventually collapsed into a very public divorce, legal battles, and custody disputes. But at the heart of it, beyond the paparazzi flashbulbs and headlines, was the painful truth of a family torn apart, children forced to witness the fragility of the adults they depended on. The impact of alcohol addiction on children is profound. Research shows that kids who grow up with a parent struggling with substance abuse often carry invisible scars, heightened anxiety, trust issues, even long-term emotional struggles that extend far into adulthood. For the Jolie-Pitt children, the weight of their father's addiction was not abstract. It was lived experience, shaping their sense of security and altering the landscape of their childhood. The broken home narrative that the media devoured so eagerly was, for them, not gossip but reality. And in that reality, one figure emerged with extraordinary resilience: Angelina Jolie. While Brad Pitt wrestled with his demons, Angelina assumed the roles of mother, protector, and provider. She not only continued her acting career and business ventures, but also deepened her humanitarian commitments, working with the United Nations and dedicating her time to vulnerable children and families around the globe. In doing so, she became more than just a film star. She became a symbol of endurance, of a woman who refused to collapse under the weight of private tragedy. To her supporters, she is admired not simply for surviving, but for standing tall, leading with compassion, and continuing to act for others while holding her own fractured family together. For years, the dissolution of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's marriage has remained one of the most scrutinized events in Hollywood, not simply because they were once the industry's golden couple, but because of the deeply human causes that brought it to an end. Pitt himself has admitted, more than once, that alcohol was at the center of the unraveling. His public acknowledgement, blunt and unvarnished, turned what might have been another celebrity scandal into a story that resonates far beyond Hollywood, an illustration of how addiction can corrode even the most enviable lives. The so-called tipping point came in 2016 during a now infamous incident aboard a private plane. Reports suggested that Pitt, under the influence of alcohol, behaved aggressively and clashed with one of the children. The details remain partially shrouded, never fully confirmed in public, but the event was enough to spark Jolie's decision to file for divorce. In hindsight, that flight has been cast as the moment when the facade of perfection collapsed, when private turmoil could no longer be hidden by the glamour of red carpets and humanitarian photo ops. What made the revelation particularly striking was the dissonance between Brad Pitt's screen persona and the reality behind closed doors. On film, he epitomized charm, control, and classic Hollywood masculinity. In private, alcohol stripped away that image, leaving behind volatility, conflict, and an atmosphere of instability within the home. When Pitt later declared, "I divorced because of alcohol," he was not only admitting to a personal failing, but also articulating a truth well known to psychologists and counselors. Substance abuse can erode trust, spark endless arguments, cloud judgment, and destabilize children's sense of safety. For the Jolie-Pitt family, those consequences were multiplied by the presence of 6 children, all growing up under intense public scrutiny. Research consistently shows that children of alcohol-dependent parents face elevated risks of anxiety, depression, and difficulties forming relationships later in life. They often carry invisible scars from years of unpredictability. To observers, the Jolie-Pitt divorce was not merely a tabloid spectacle. It was a reminder that the emotional security of children can be deeply compromised when a parent is trapped in addiction. In this way, what unfolded inside one of Hollywood's most famous households reflected the struggles of countless families outside the spotlight. As Pitt's vulnerabilities became public, Angelina Jolie's resilience came into sharper relief. With the marriage over, she assumed the central role of protector and parent, shouldering the responsibility of raising 6 children while continuing her career and expanding her global humanitarian work. She traveled to war zones, spoke on behalf of refugees, and maintained a public image not of a fallen star, but of a woman determined to stand firm. For many, Jolie's decision not to collapse under the weight of personal tragedy, but to keep moving forward, made her more than a celebrity. She became a symbol of endurance, admired for her ability to shield her family while still contributing to causes far larger than herself. That does not mean Brad Pitt disappeared from the narrative. On the contrary, he began a parallel journey of reckoning and repair. After the divorce, he sought therapy, joined recovery programs, and spoke openly about his struggle with alcohol. This candor marked a significant shift. For an actor long admired as a paragon of control and charisma, admitting to brokenness was a radical act. Pitt's story then became not just one of downfall, but of potential redemption, the recognition that healing begins only when denial ends. Together, the two trajectories, Jolie's resilience and Pitt's repentance, form a portrait of a family scarred by addiction but also grappling with the possibility of renewal. For observers, the story underscored a broader truth. Alcohol does not discriminate. It can infiltrate homes rich or poor, public or private, celebrated or anonymous. No amount of fame or wealth can insulate a family from the corrosive effects of addiction. And yet, within that bleak reality lies another truth: the human capacity to endure, to protect, and to rebuild, even when the damage feels irreparable. When Brad Pitt said, "I divorced because of alcohol," it was more than a personal confession. It was an acknowledgement of a wider social problem, one that undermines relationships across all layers of society. His words resonated precisely because they revealed that beneath the trappings of fame lay the same vulnerabilities that haunt ordinary lives. And if his downfall illustrates the destructive power of addiction, then Angelina Jolie's steadfastness illustrates the countervailing power of resilience. Yet this story is not about vilifying Brad Pitt or sanctifying Angelina Jolie. It is about the universal reality that even those who appear untouchable are not immune to the destructive power of addiction. It is about the way alcohol can quietly dismantle relationships, distort identities, and leave children caught in its wake. And it is also about the possibility of redemption, for Brad Pitt, in seeking sobriety and confronting his failures, and for Angelina Jolie, in demonstrating that strength does not mean the absence of pain, but the determination to carry on despite it.